Well, welcome to Don't Know Much About, where it all begins with a question. Today, I'm really excited to bring into the studio Eyal Yakoby. You may have read about him in the news, or if you're on X, he's really one of the leading voices reporting on the scourge of Jew hatred that has captured our institutions and our streets. Eyal Yakoby is a recent graduate of the University of Pennsylvania with a degree in political science and modern Middle East studies. Very interesting. And an incoming student at MIT. He's a prominent voice on issues of radicalism and extremism. He spoke at a House Congressional Leadership Press Conference in the year 2023 and testified before the House Judiciary Committee in 2024. You may have seen Eyal as he's appeared on TV networks, including CNN, ABC, and Fox, and has contributed to publications such as The Washington Post, The New York Times, The New York Post. He will be joining me in just a few weeks for the first ever symposium to combat anti-Zionism in Toronto on May 17th. That's right, you heard that correctly. Not anti-Semitism, not Jew hatred, but the disease of our time that has been terrorizing Jews and Israelis for the last few decades. So with that, it is my honor, privilege to invite you, Eyal, on my show. Don't know much about. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
You're so welcome. I'm kind of you've got a star quality, so I'm kind of excited to sit with you. But one of the reasons I really wanted to sit down with you is not only because your voice is so prominent on social media, but you are quite young, and you seem to have captured the problem, which is unusual because usually young people are more idealistic and they fall for a lot of the ideas. So I just wanted to know a little bit about your background. Who formed you or what formed you to prepare you so that when you were at UPenn studying in the Middle East Studies program, which I'd love to hear about that too. How did you know what you were seeing? How did you understand it?
Definitely. I think, number one, I've always been an opinionated individual beyond just issues of anti-Semitism in Israel and politics in general. But what basically happened at UPenn is it started actually a few weeks before October 7th. It happened when UPenn hosted this conference called the Palestine Rights Literature Festival, where they invited a menu of the world's most prominent terror supporters, anti-Semites, anti-Americans, the list goes on. And I was shocked. My grandpa went to Penn, my mom, both my aunts, my older brother went to Penn. And for me, the Penn's nickname is Jew Penn. It's always been kind of what I viewed as a safe haven for Jews. It used to have 30% Jewish population. Now it's down to 10%. Either Jews have gotten significantly dumber over the past 2 decades, or there's something more systemic. So this conference for me was shocking.
And you were what, a freshman?
I was a senior.
Oh, you were a senior. Okay.
I was a senior. And I was shocked by it, to say the least. And I basically wrote an article for the school newspaper. It was, the first article I've ever written. Mm-hmm. And in my mind, it was kind of like, that's enough. And then they kept inviting more speakers. And we're talking like, if you've heard of Susan Abu Hala, for instance, mm-hmm. who has compared Jews, not Israelis, not Zionists, Jews to cancer cells. And so I then wrote a petition, and in like 24 hours, I got about 400 or 500 signatures on it. And I, sent it to a couple local Philadelphia news outlets and just tried to get a little bit more attention or buzz around it, because a lot of parents didn't even know that this was happening. Donors didn't know it was happening. And from there, I was introduced to, alumni, other students who were more quote unquote like activists. I still don't consider myself an activist. Before that, I surely was not an activist. And and on October 7th, we actually had a Zoom scheduled to discuss, where does this go? Because to paint the picture, from the Palestine Rights Literature Festival, which was on September 22nd, to October 7th. Mm-hmm. That's a 3-week time span. We had that festival. We had a swastika drawn inside a campus building. We had the Hillel, someone broke into, flipped tables and chairs, and yelled, "Fuck the Jews." We had the Chabad House, sukkah, vandalized in the matter of 3 weeks. And so there's always going to be bigotry. I understand that. So there's going to be, instances here and there of something happening. But 4 events in the matter of 3 weeks was something much more deeply rooted and systemic. And so fast forward to October 7th, we were dealing with that. October 7th happens, everything blows up. And so I was already kind of in a position to continue what I was doing, just from a few isolated incidents to a massacre that happened 7,000 miles away.
Yeah. So, I'm glad that you pointed at. I'm not even sure you were, intentionally pointing it out, but I'm actually glad that you talked about this, because a lot of people in the social media world kind of think that the problem of this anti-Zionism, which is the new form of Jew hatred, proliferated after October 7th. And that's just really not the case. As you are pointing out, just 3 weeks prior, you've got 4 events, anti-Jewish events, like very obvious anti-Jewish events. So, but my question to you is, up until then, you weren't really involved. You didn't see much on your campus. Like, why all of a sudden, freshman year, sophomore year, junior year, nothing, but then 3 weeks prior to October 7th, is that the correct kind of portrait of your life as an undergrad?
Yeah, I mean, there were. I would go to Chabad for the high holidays and a couple Shabbat dinners here and there. But I was obviously Jewish. I was very proud Jew, but I'm saying I wasn't as, let's say, ingrained in Jewish life at Penn. It wasn't like Hillel was somewhere I was going every day. I wasn't going Shabbat dinners every week, and so it definitely was kind of a shift from. I went to more Shabbat dinners in the 2 months after October 7th than the year before.
Okay, but what about being in school in the Middle East Studies department? What kind of classes, what kind of discourse, what kind of narratives, demonization narratives are you being introduced to?
I mean, look, the curriculum was obviously
so it was
very skewed in class, but I would always speak. I mean, I don't
So
care.
you did speak up before.
Of course, but not to an extent of it was more of an intellectual debate in class on whether this is right or wrong. For instance, my sophomore year, I took a class about the post-World War II Middle East and reshaping borders. And one of the pictures we were presented on screen was the disappearing Palestine with the green, the 4 panels. And I raised my hand and I said, this is just completely garbage, false. I mean,
you said that?
I said it was. I didn't say it was garbage, false. I said it was false. I didn't say garbage. And I got in a discussion with my professor in front of the 60-person lecture, just saying this is obviously not true. I mean, that picture is the stupidest thing ever, because Egypt and Jordan controlled that, and
that from 49 to 67.
It's as though Egypt and Jordan just didn't exist during this time. I mean, it also doesn't make sense because it doesn't account for Arabs living in Israel. It doesn't account for the expansion. It doesn't make sense.
I know, but it's one of the most brilliant, I think, propaganda tools. It tells I know exactly what you're talking about. I teach it, in other words, how to take it down. It's very effective because it has in the 4 panels, it basically tells a story. Once upon a time, Palestine. Over time, you've got this terrible white population, European transplants coming over and taking over. But anyway, okay, so it's good that I understand, because in my mind, I was like, freshman, sophomore, junior year, he doesn't really say much, but it's not true. If in class, if your professor says something or you see something that's incorrect, you did raise your hand, which brings me to the other question of, I said this when I introduced you. You are a very young, voice, and lots of young people are, if you look at statistics right now, a lot of young Jews, especially, join the anti-Zionist movement on campus. Why not you? I want to understand, how did you know what you knew? Because I think it's really important to share that.
First of all, as I mentioned, it's very difficult to change my opinion on something.
Yeah, but you could be okay, fine. I understand that you're opinionated, and I'm sure you were in the debate team, right? No?
Model UN.
Model UN, okay. But still, you had to have a foundation. Where did you get your foundation? Where did you get your value system?
I think, obviously, from my family, from having family that lives in Israel, but I see it more. I view everything kind of as a package, and like the way that I put it is tell me who was burning cities in 2020. I'll tell you exactly where they stand on Israel. Tell me who celebrated the Charlie Kirk assassination. I'll tell you exactly where they stand on Israel. Tell me who celebrated Trump getting shot in Butler, Pennsylvania. I'll tell you exactly what their views are on Israel. Tell me who burns American flags. I'll tell you what their views are on Israel. And that's the way that I see, whether it be, anti-Semitism, anti-Zionism, the resurgence of being pro-communist, pro-Maduro, pro-Cuba. It's all the same in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me at least, it's definitely a focal point to combat the anti-Zionism aspect and the anti-Semitism aspect of it. But I think it's more of a package of cancerous ideologies that need to be fought. And I view personally that I think Israel is going to be fine either way. Let's say, America, 100% of Americans don't want Israel, don't believe in a Jewish state. I think Israel's going to be fine at the end of the day. Israel just signed a new agreement with India, which is 1.3 billion people. Millet is currently visiting Israel right now. You have Eastern Europe that's strengthening ties with Israel on security agreements. I worry way more about where is London? Where's the UK? Where's France and Paris in 15, 20 years? Where's Berlin? Brussels right now is literally it's not a European city anymore. I view that as way more dangerous to Western civilization than I do Israel specifically, because Israel's not going anywhere. One of the statements that I hate is saying, I believe Israel has a right to exist. It's just a stupid statement. Why would I say that? Like, why does anyone say that? I don't say that about America. I obviously believe it, but you don't say that. And so I worry way more. Where's New York City after 4 years of Zohran Mamdani, for instance? And so that's how I view anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism, is much less of one issue, but more of a core system of cancerous ideologies that need to be combated.
Mm-hmm. And you do realize that, again, I'm like kind of trying to find out, maybe, I don't know. Again, I'm from the former Soviet Union. So I'll share with you. The reason I know that communism is a dangerous idea, I wouldn't probably know this if I grew up to American Jewish parents, probably not, or even just American parents. I understand that totalitarianism is dangerous because I'm a Jew, because of my parents, as I say, from the former Soviet Union. But again, people in your generation, the likelihood of them articulating what you just articulated is not very high, to say that, look, I view anti-Zionism and anti-Westernism as comorbid of this kind of bigger systemic problem of you're saying, I think Israel's going to be fine. You think, I'm not sure, but we could talk about that. But your issue is the West going to be fine? And so I still wonder, because so many young people are captured by this idea of communism. I mean, I even had students not too long ago tell me that if America were to decide to become a communist country, that's okay. If that's what they want to decide. And, communism is not an anathema to American ideas. And I'm sitting and I'm wondering, how did you know that that these ideas are very dangerous? And I agree with you that I am worried. I think that the anti-Zionism or the anti-Semitism is really kind of a signal to signal what is a deeper threat. So how did you know? Is it because, who are your parents? Can you tell me a little bit about that? Do they come from countries that were from the Middle East or from the former a communist country?
Well, my family way back goes back to Poland, but that doesn't have any influence over my beliefs. My dad is from Israel. My mom is from America. I think that I like winners. I don't like losers. The Soviet Union lost. Communism lost. It still exists in Cuba and Venezuela, which are losing countries.
I love it.
So I think it's more of an idea of like whether you want to be a winner in life or you want to be a loser in life. And I like to choose the side of winners. I think Israel is a winning society that's turned a desert with basically no natural resources to a tech global superpower. I like the Emirates because, the Emirates is different. They do have natural resources, but they've shifted their society to being from, mostly desert tents to now Dubai being one of the most modern cities in the world. And so I like winners, not losers. Communism is a losing ideology. It's seen that throughout history. Capitalism is a winning ideology.
Very nicely said. I like that. Um, I want to shift a little bit before we go into kind of your MIT case, because I want you to share as much as you feel comfortable. Um, I mean, I don't know if you don't know me. We just met, but the audience, I don't know if they know this. But like you, I started becoming what we call an activist when I was an undergraduate, and I spoke up a lot. I also, would raise my hand and push back against what I was being told on my campus or in my classroom. And I did just a lot of events. I brought like Dennis Prager to my campus, Itamar Marcus from Palestinian Media Watch. And I'm curious if you experienced this. When I started to speak up and demand that anti-Zionism be recognized as a form of Jew hatred and demand that kind of the takeover, this communist, this red-green alliance, I was met by Jewish leadership on my campus that told me not to speak up. I'm just going to share my experience. My Hillel director sat me down. I mean, this is many years ago, but sat me down and said, look, you're a Russian speaking Jew. You guys kind of like have a lot of trauma. You've come, there's a little bit of gaslighting there. And you guys tend to be much more on the right politically. So, he basically told me that all my activities, everything that I was saying was actually endangering Jewish student life on campus, and really pushed me to not do my activism. Now, I didn't listen, but I remember that was one of the biggest challenges for me was not really even the anti-Zionists and the Islamists and the Marxists, because those I understood how to deal with. What I couldn't understand is fellow Jewish professionals in leadership positions who wanted to silence me and actually turned it around by telling me I'm endangering. Did you encounter any of that?
I can't think of any particular
That's
examples.
amazing.
If that was to happen, I would kind of just
So on your
ignore it, if I'm
campus,
being honest.
right? So on your campus, you weren't told like this is the way that you need to kind of respond to this Palestinian literature or book. What was it called?
Palestine Rights Literature Festival.
The Literature Rights Festival. Like nobody ever kind of tried to dissuade you, right? None of that.
I mean, I think that was something that I was lucky about, or I don't know if I would use the word lucky, but I wasn't representing any Jewish organizations. I wasn't the head of any Jewish I was myself. I was an individual. And so there was no one had the power to tell me to stop because I wasn't representing anyone except myself.
I see.
And so I think that behooved me during it. I'm sure if I was part of an organization, then there would have been, we're handling this from the top. You're, overstepping, stuff like that. I'm sure that would have happened. But with me personally, it was just that I was an individual, and so no one was able to say anything.
Got it. But you never but that event still continued, right?
Yeah, still haven't.
Also, by the way, your university, UPenn, I was doing research on after October 8th, 100 chapters of Faculty for Justice in Palestine sprouted. They were ready to go basically by October 8th, October 9th, and UPenn had a chapter for Faculty for Justice in Palestine. Can you kind of talk about the day after October 7th on your campus? What was that like? And is your campus with the guy who said it was exhilarating, or was that not the
Yes.
Okay. I remember that.
The way that I describe October 7th is I was a college student. I'm 23 now. I was 21 at the time, 22 at the time. And I went out on a Friday night with all my friends, just like thousands of young Israelis the same age went to the Nova Festival. I woke up on an Ivy League campus. They woke up either dead in Gaza or running for their lives. And that's, I think, the simple equation of what happened. And for me, that was deeply impactful. And I promised myself on October 7th that I would or I guess October 8th, and that was I would do everything in my power to do what I can in the US, despite me not being there, to raise awareness for the hostages, to make sure that, Israeli soldiers fighting barbarians are, depicted well and defenders of freedom and democracy and an actual civilized society. And so while I was, looking through Telegram and Twitter, crying at the images, I simultaneously saw professors in my, political science and modern Middle East studies department saying beautiful sights to wake up to, victory with the bulldozer. They were ready. The bulldozer. I saw campus groups posting statements celebrating the October 7th massacre. And what I always get back to, I was a senior in high school during the 2020 BLM riots. If a single person, not even organization, if a single person celebrated the murder of George Floyd, they would have been immediately suspended, if not expelled, and a pariah at whether it be in high school, middle school, college. Immediately, no questions asked.
No question.
But you can celebrate the rape and beheading and slaughter of people, all videoed, all filmed, and there's nothing from the administration, nothing at all. Penn had to release 3 or 4 separate statements condemning the October 7th massacre because everyone was more pathetic than the last one. And so suddenly this sense of moral clarity just disappeared. It was all moral ambiguity or celebration. And that was scary. And I think anyone, honestly, who supports civilization itself should be scared by how many people celebrated the massacre. Forget the aftermath. Forget, people always talk about what's happening now, what happened in Gaza was wrong and all of that, and that almost justifies the attacks on Israel. I think people forget on October 7th, before any shot was fired back, there were utter celebration of what happened, like complete celebration of what happened, and nothing at all.
And there were encampments, right?
There was an encampment so we were the first campus to have an encampment because they took over our student center in around Thanksgiving time. They completely took over. I mean, they had, I don't know if you can like overlay the podcast. I can send you a photo. They had literal hammocks and like air mattresses in our student center. Just completely took it over. The school gave them 48 hours to evacuate. They were there for 2 weeks. And the only reason they left is because it was winter break.
Yeah, I've spoken to a few legal experts who've taken on student cases, and we're going to talk about yours in a second. And the consensus that they have arrived to is that the universities had the laws, they just weren't applying them. It's not that, and I was going to ask you also later about, do we need a better definition of anti-Semitism? Do we need to adopt IRA, et cetera, or were the law, from what I understand, at UCLA, for instance, this is my alma mater where I did my graduate work. The encampments lasted, I think, perhaps almost a month and prevented not students from being able to get to class. They basically destroyed the campus. They, vandalized furniture. They vandalized doors. They, what's it called? They broke windows. You don't need a definition of Jew hatred to know that this is, as you say, this is anti-civilizational. This is not how we behave. So in my opinion, it was just such weak, cowardly leadership that just didn't want to apply these laws. And I have some students who I used to teach there now at UC Berkeley, and the chancellor of UC Berkeley sat down with the Jewish students behind closed doors and said to them, basically, so I'm paraphrasing, that it's easier to deal with the Jewish students than it is with the other students, with the pro-Palestinian anti-Zionist students. So, we know it's easier to deal with you guys. And it's just, look, I'm a parent, I have a kid. There's really one way to discipline. it's called timeout. And if that doesn't work, you go to the next, and you just call disciplining. And they weren't disciplining these students. So I don't understand. And basically, in your case, they the only reason they left, as you say, is they went to winter break. Yeah. So you graduated from UPenn and you went to MIT.
I still haven't.
You
gone
still
to
haven't.
MIT yet.
Okay. So, and what is your field?
In a business degree.
And what happened there
At UPenn or
for your case that?
for my lawsuit? Oh,
Yes.
With Penn. So I think, just to touch on your point first off on whether the laws, we don't have the correct law. I generally am against speech laws just across the board. I don't think it really helps. I also don't think it really applies to what happened at universities, because the issue was not speech, it was conduct, number one.
Very important.
And number two is these are private institutions. They can have whatever rules and laws that they want. It's a private institution.
Mm-hmm.
And number three is your rights cannot infringe on other people's rights. And what I mean by that is you have a right to protest. You don't have a right to block people from attending classes.
Mm-hmm.
And on a more general basis, I think the issue with universities is that the purpose of university is academic excellence. It's to go to class. It's to learn. It's to debate. That's the purpose of university. If you're not fulfilling that mission by blocking students from going to class, by professors, which has happened, kicking students out of their class because they disagree with them over ideology, making students have lower grades, threatening students, which has happened, that goes against a university's mission purpose. And it goes against the reason that some of our tax dollars go to universities. The point of our tax dollars going to university is to educate the next generation of Americans to start business and then feeding back into the system. If you're not educating, if you're indoctrinating, then there's no point that you receive federal funding. If you're teaching kids how to hate America, why would American tax dollars go to your university? I think it's a really simple equation, really. When you think about it, it's very simple. And so I don't think like we need new laws. I just think we need to apply the laws that we have. A great example of this is at Northwestern University, when they literally took over the campus, rioted, caused thousands of dollars of damage, and ultimately the president made an agreement with them. It was the Mayflowers, the I forget the exact name, agreement, where it was almost like a hostage situation where these universities were taken hostage by the students, many of whom, by the way, weren't students. I would say Penn's encampment was like 60-40 non-student to student and faculty.
Who were they if they weren't students? I was
professional Antifa, professional Antifa. I mean, it's so funny because now when there's these videos of like the anti-ICE protests that are happening, I literally see the same people that I saw on campus that were in the encampments protesting ICE. It's clearly a system of employed people to protest. I think
amazing.
But in terms of lawsuits, so we filed litigation against Penn a little over a year and a half ago on violating our civil rights. And I mean, there's people
because of conduct. And I agree with you that there needs to be a separation between freedom of speech, and I also agree with you there. But you were saying this is about conduct. Okay.
So I'll give you an example, actually, of when the moment I made the decision to sue is so when the break into the Hillel happened, as I mentioned, at Penn, just because by virtue of us being in West Philadelphia, it's obviously not the safest neighborhood in the country, we get alerts from like campus police. So, armed robbery, mugging, but we'll get these alerts for like anything, like a shoe store robbery 15 blocks away from campus, we'll get an alert.
Mm-hmm.
But with the Hillel, we didn't get an alert. And one of the biggest things that I told campus police is like, why did you try to like suppress that? And we didn't get like a school email about this happening until 4 days later and stuff. And I was so confused. I was like, if someone is breaking into a religious organization and flipping over tables and chairs and saying, fuck the Jews, that seems like a perfect opportunity for you to send a text message saying, don't go near Hillel. Right. There's a crazy person. And to this day, we know it's a student that did it, but they would never admit that it was a student. I don't know why. So that was a big point of contention that I had with campus police and the provost at Penn. And they assured me, they were like, hopefully nothing like this happens again. If something like this does happen again, You're right. We dropped the ball. We'll make sure that we do it.
Mm-hmm.
Fast forward to a month later, and I'm eating lunch in Hillel, and there's a bunch of it's like SWAT with canine sniffing dogs walking throughout the building and outside of the building. And I was like, this is pretty weird, honestly. And so I go up to, a couple people and I'm like, do you guys know what's happening? I find out that there was an active bomb threat against the Hillel. And we were all just like 200 people were just eating. It was made at 8 a.m. And the school didn't send a campus-wide email until 9 p.m. that night. And when I asked, they were like, well, we didn't think it was a credible threat. I was like, if you didn't think it was a credible threat, there wouldn't have been 10 bomb sniffing dogs in it. And right there is when I realized that they don't care at all about safety. All they care about is protecting their image and appeasement. That's it. And cowardice. And so that's when I made the decision to do it. And that's an example of conduct that's not free speech. On the free speech side, I think there's a gray area because you can say fuck the Jews. You can say kill the Jews. That's all protected under the First Amendment. But universities don't have to abide by the First Amendment. They have their own private institutions where they can do what they want to preserve the core mission of education. And so an example of this is I wrote an honors thesis for Middle East Studies, and I had to speak to the department chair, about it. And this is about 2 months after October 7th. And the department chair essentially said to me, if you keep speaking up, professors in the Middle East Studies department are going to go to the police to silence you.
What?
And I go, what do you mean go to the police? I haven't done anything. And he goes, you're harassing professors. You're not going to be able to finish your thesis. And I was like, how am I harassing? But at this point, mind you, I didn't have a social media account. I started my social media account in the spring of my senior year. I had no social media account. All I had done is given a speech before Congress and gone on the news. Didn't really mention any professors by name either. And so that was a perfect example of him trying to coerce me through speech to be silenced. And so that's an example of he has the right to say that to me. He doesn't have the right as a department chair to say that to me. And Penn never done anything about it.
Did you tell anyone?
Of course, it's in my lawsuit as well.
Was it? Oh my God, that's insane. But see, that's kind of the whole thing. I think the universities are so rotten, are so sick. They, like you said, what is the purpose? Is to go and to educate yourself, to think, to be exposed to different ideas, to debate, to argue. That's what I loved. When I went to university, it was still there. And I feel like there's this kind of this orthodoxy now, and anybody who deviates is severely punished. And that to me is, again, the anti-Semitism, the anti-Zionism is signaling that's a bigger problem. Wow, that's an insane story. So what ended up happening for you?
I finished with my honors thesis.
What was your honors thesis about?
It was about the dynamic between how Israel and Saudi Arabia were prior to the 79 revolution and prior to the 6-Day War the 6-7 war were, it's the inverse. So now the Iranian regime and Israel are kind of like mortal enemies. But
Whereas
before 79, it was the Saudis and Israelis that really hated each other, and how it basically flipped because Saudi Arabia viewed Iran more of a threat than Israel. And so it strengthened ties with Israel. And now it's kind of like a new dynamic. And then the end is basically a path towards a Indo-European corridor that connects India to the UAE, to Saudi, to Israel, to Europe. And it's basically a whole energy and tech pipeline into Europe.
Very cool. Well, I'm glad you got to finish that. I want to return back to something you said a while before, which is that you said Israel is going to remain, you think. And for you, it's more about what will happen to Berlin, what will happen to London, Toronto, New York. Just this morning, I was on X, I was on social media, and in Copenhagen, I think, on the streets right now, there's this, they basically are performing the spectacle of the Israeli soldier who is, violently, accosting a Palestinian woman. She's holding this fake doll baby. It's a blood libel, and it's happening in Europe. It's just and it's it's whites. It's not, it's not even Muslims who are participating in this. It's medieval. It's also very medieval because they're creating this kind of, they're putting this in the public, this kind of public demonstration of the Jew, the effigy of the Jew, the Jewish doll, Bibi Netanyahu, that they shoot up in there was this town in Spain just a couple of weeks ago. And I understand that Judeo-Christian values are worth preserving. I get that. But I almost feel like the West can't liberate itself. No amount of Holocaust museums and Holocaust memorials can liberate the West from its pattern, from its proclivity towards demonizing Jews. And so I'm kind of, it's interesting to listen to you. If you talked to me a year ago, I kind of was where you are, in the sense that I was more worried about that the anti-Semitism or the anti-Zionism was really a threat to the West. And right now I'm looking at what is going on in the world, and I'm worried about the Jews. I really am. I'm worried about the well-being of the Jewish people. Maybe you shared this or somebody else on social media, 2 Israelis in Thailand just sitting there eating, and they were, again, verbally accosted, called baby killers. In Brazil, there was a sign, no, we won't serve Israelis or U.S. citizens. So I am really worried about the Jew hatred. I think it's gone to a level, like a five alarm level. I am worried about it. I know that it is a miracle that Israel exists, but we had our sovereignty 2,000 plus years ago. We lost it. And the fact of the matter is, I'm not sure how, eternal it is to have Israel. So I am very concerned about world opinion. I am concerned when Francesca Albanese stands up and says that the enemy of humanity is Israel. I'm concerned. And you do so much work on social media. You almost like a reporting. Everything that you post has to do with the Jews and the vilification and demonization of Israel. So where are you in all this? And what do you think about this idea that perhaps, yes, Judeo-Christian values are good and ideal, I guess, but the West, whatever we mean by the West, Europe is kind of beholden to this historic Jew hatred.
I think obviously anti-Semitism is really bad right now. Don't get me wrong. There was this morning the 4th arson attack on a synagogue in London in the past month. The reason I think a little bit more hope is what I would call it, is that when these societies that you're talking about, Brazil, record inflation right now under Lula, Spain, Pedro Sanchez, far left, just allowed 500,000 migrants to grant them legal residency, and the economy has complete stagnation. The UK, the economic outlook for the UK in the next 5 years is horrible. It could not be worse. With France, same thing. With Germany, it's the same. These are stagnant countries that have internal issues that they need to reckon with. When you look at countries who are actually on the rise, Argentina, where inflation is getting significantly lowered, India, which is one of the most developing countries in the world. When you look at Eastern Europe, where their GDPs are growing, Poland just cracked $1 billion GDP. These are countries where relations with Israel are strong, and patriotism is strong, and proud countries. And so the reason I think I'm not as worried is, you talk about, 3,000 years ago we had sovereignty, yeah, but we didn't have nuclear weapons. We didn't have F-35 fighter jets. We didn't have a standing army with the best equipment that mankind has ever seen. And so yes, we had sovereignty 3,000 years ago. We also didn't have a nuclear weapon 3,000 years ago. And so the reason I think I'm
And do you think that Israel is capable of being not a client state of the United States and just, existing on its own? Do you think they need America right now and the American tax dollar?
I think from an Israeli perspective, I would, if I was Israel, I wouldn't want to take in the
Same.
$3.8 billion in aid every year. If, as an American, I do want Israel to do that because we gain a lot economically and militarily from them taking that money and just have a lot of leverage over them from it.
Mm-hmm.
From an Israeli perspective, it's a fraction of it used to be a decent amount of their GDP, but now it really is insignificant to their GDP.
But if America were not, do you think Israel would be fine?
If America like abandoned Israel, for instance, yeah, 100%. I mean, first of all, this term of like abandonment, like you see all these countries in Europe, for instance, that are constantly like these leaders attacking Israel and stuff. The reason they haven't like cut any ties off is because they rely on Israel so much for intelligence that it's basically impossible for them to do that. Like the UK relies so heavily on Israel and the US, the Mossad and the CIA for intelligence on potential terror attacks. There's a 15 thwarted Iranian-backed terror plots in the UK that have been thwarted probably because of Mossad intelligence. And so I think it's very difficult for countries to quote unquote abandon Israel because Israel provides a lot of value to them. I think the best way for Israel to be strong is to continue to progress and develop. That's the way that Israel will be the most secure, is when they offer value to other countries, which they are currently, but continuing that.
Okay, fair enough. And what about what's happening here at home, not on the left, but on the right? What are your thoughts on that in terms of, Tucker Carlson, Megyn Kelly, that they are now saying, I think Cannery Missions made a video of Anna Kasparian and was it
Nick Fuentes?
Nick Fuentes, and it was like the same word for word. She's on the left, he's on the right, and it's just wow. So are you concerned? Not so concerned?
I think it's a problem. Again, I'm just not. I'm not that concerned. Again, it's just
why are you not?
It's still losing mentality. Like I just don't like this losing mentality of like self-deprecation of we're in a bad spot. Like we're in a good spot. The Jewish people, in my opinion,
we're in a good spot.
I think the Jewish people, in terms of history, are in a pretty good spot right now. I think we're.
So I have to tell you, it's so interesting because if you go to your social media, you share a lot of the horrors. So it's like, why don't you share that kind of positivity also?
Well, I think it's much easier, number one, to share negatives. And when I say we're in a pretty good spot, I'm saying historically speaking, I think we're in a pretty good spot. I think currently in like the past, 3 decades, the Jewish people are in a very bad spot compared to, 2 decades ago. But if you look at history, I think the Jewish people are in a pretty good spot. And I think it largely has to do with Israel, is that there's always a backup plan. There's always a backup plan. And before there wasn't. If Israel existed during World War II, 6 million Jews would have been saved. If there was places for the Jews to go during the Spanish Inquisition, thousands of Jews would have been saved. I mean, there's still Spanish families living in Spain that will find out that they were actually Jewish but had to convert because King Ferdinand forced the Jews to convert. And so I'm saying that I think the Jewish people, it would be self-serving for Jewish people in general, I think, to be less victim-oriented and more winner-oriented when discussing anti-Semitism and the state of affairs right now. Because, as I said, I don't think Israel's going anywhere. I mean, the shekel just hit a new record high. The GDP has grown so much in the past 2 years. I think it's about internal fighting in Israel and society between the Haredis and the secular Jews. In Israel, I think that's our biggest challenge that we face right now. And I think in the diaspora, the biggest challenge we face is how younger Jews are getting sucked into the anti-Zionism aspect.
Why do you think that is?
I think it has a lot to do with COVID. I think,
Oh,
people are
interesting.
online. I think there was a lot of isolation after COVID. I think whether it be BLM, whether it be anti-ICE, whether it be anti-Zionism, it provides a community for people to have relationships and connections and have purpose in life. And so I think that is where it is the foundation of it. I think young people in America are lacking purpose in their lives, and I think this offers them purpose.
Mm, very, very good observation. Tell me what you think. I'm also curious what you identify the challenge in Israel between the Haredi and the secular. What do you think that is about the tension there? And
You're gonna get me in trouble for
oh no,
no, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I think Haredi Jews need to serve in the military, and I think they need to stop not serving in the military, and they have to go to school and work.
hmm uh, when we say, for instance, kippot rugot, which is that they're not considered Haredi. Like, what do you mean
I'm
by
saying like
Haredi?
sorry. I'm saying like the Hasidic ultra orthodox, the ones that won't serve, the ones that don't work.
So that's for you. Okay.
I think that's the big. I think most Israelis would even probably agree with that. That there's a huge issue in Israel right now that you essentially have 50% of the population producing 100% of the economic output, defending the country, and I think it's a massive issue. And I similarly, there's people in Tel Aviv that are on the far left that say I'm not serving the military because it doesn't align with my values. They also need to do something. I don't care if it doesn't have to. I think there should be something similar like this in the U.S. too. I think for a year, everyone should have to do something for the country. You can clean up the parks. You can care to old people. You can volunteer in hospitals as nurses. You can join the military if you want. You can be a national parksman. Just something to help to benefit society. And so in terms of Israel, I think the biggest issue right now, and this goes for Arab citizens, there's zero reason why Israeli Arabs do not serve the country in some capacity. If we're talking about an apartheid system of two laws for two different people, there's a law that Jews have to serve in the IDF,
Right, but
there's no
Arabs
law
are
that Arabs have to
exempt.
serve in the IDF. That makes zero sense. And if they don't want to serve in the IDF, they don't have to. Go clean up a park. Go do something for the country for the benefit of the country. And I think it's ridiculous too. Like I think it's ridiculous. Israel can't maintain that Arabs are core part of the country, Israeli Arabs, but then not force them to behave in the same capacity as other citizens.
Mm-hmm.
And the same goes for Hasidic Jews, that if they're going to live in Israel and be protected by the IDF and they feel like they can't serve in the IDF for religious reasons, fine. Go do tikkun olam and go clean up the national parks. I think that's the biggest issue for Israelis. I'm very passionate about this subject.
I see you're very passionate about it. Well, listen, I'm really excited to have sat down with you, and I really love the fact that I think if I had to sum up your philosophy, it's that you like a story, a winner story, and I really love that. And I also say when people ask me, what do I think about the issue of anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism? Of course, it's everything I think of all the time. But I also say that as a Jew, and I hate saying that, as a Jew, but as really, it is the most miraculous time to live in. Because if you ask me, oh, would you have liked to be born in the Renaissance or the 19th century, early 19th, or the 12th century? No, I live in a time where we have our sovereignty back, and it's just amazing. I'm in complete awe of what Israel has done in the short amount of time, complete awe of the country. And I'm really in awe of your just moral clarity. So thank you for that. I'm
Thank you for
also
having me on.
excited that you'll be joining us. So before we kind of wrap up, you're coming to speak at the first ever World Symposium against anti-Zionism. What is anti-Zionism? If somebody asked you what that is, what would you say?
Anti-Zionism belief that Israel doesn't have a right to exist.
Does that make it anti-Semitic?
It depends.
Okay. What do you mean by that?
I think if you maintain the same, we spoke about this earlier. This idea of like Israel has a right to exist. It's like Israel does exist. That's it. Period. So like
Correct.
saying it doesn't have a right to exist, I think
Yeah, that I get, but I'm asking, a lot of people believe that it's very important to show that anti-Zionism is a form of Jew hatred. Do you think that is?
I think the word Zionist has gotten misconstrued so much in the past 2 years that I think people don't. I've spoken.
What is Zionism?
Zionism? The belief that Israel has a right to exist.
See, I hate that definition, I have to tell you, because there's no such thing as Francism. To your point, because Israel already exists, why do we need to say that the belief that Israel has, it exists? For me, Zionism is an expression of Jewish identity. It's an expression of the Jewish longing, connection, history, ancestral connection to the land of Israel. I think that when we say Zionism is the belief that the Jewish state has a right to exist, inadvertently we are putting ourselves on kind of this on defense position.
I agree that what you just gave is the actual definition of Zionism. I'm saying that currently I think the definition is Israel has a right to exist. Israel doesn't have a right to exist. I'm saying I think the word has gotten so misconstrued, and I think part of the symposium in Toronto, the conference, is I think reclaiming what the actual definition of Zionism is. I think that's something that Jewish organizations need to work on, is to make it clear what Zionism actually means. Because I agree. What you said is the actual definition. What I said, I think if you ask the average person on the street, that's what they think it is. And I think, I think anti-Semitism is different. And I think Jew hatred is different. I think they're all different in terms of the ideologies behind it. I think Jew hate is a hatred of Jews for who they are. I think anti-Semitism is a mental illness because you hate Jews for something they haven't done, if that makes sense.
Well, you construct a sort of villain, a demon.
And it's different than Jew hatred, because Jew hatred is just, I hate Jews because they're Jews. Anti-Semitism is what I think, like, the lies, like there's the
conspiracies.
The Tucker Carlson newsletter last week had that IDF trains dogs to rape Palestinians. That's anti-Semitism.
Wow, I hadn't heard that. That's
anti-Semitism, because that's just an obvious fabrication lie. There's not enough adjectives to describe how crazy of a conspiracy theory is. That's anti-Semitism. And then Zionism, I think, is more based off of the land of Zion itself and whether Jews have the connection to the land, whether they should have a state there in the present times. That's, I think, anti-Zionism. And obviously they're all interconnected in a bunch of ways, but I think it's important to establish which is which.
All right. Well, we're really excited to have you there. I'm really excited that you came on the show. Thank you so much for watching this special episode of Don't Know Much About. Oh, by the way, where could people follow you?
On X at Yakoby, Eyakoby, and on Instagram at Eyal Yakoby, Eyalyyakoby.
Amazing. Follow him. I do. I get a lot of my news from him. So thank you so much. If you liked what you heard today, please like, share, subscribe to my YouTube channel, and remember, and Spotify and Apple Play. Remember, it all begins with a question. Till next time.